The battlefield was a graveyard of fire and smoke. Daniel Cole lay on the cold ground, his body covered in mud, his breathing heavy and broken. His rifle was gone, his armor cracked, and his whole squad was gone. The sky above was red with fire from burning ships, and the air smelled of blood and metal. For a moment, Daniel thought he was the last human alive in this place. He pushed himself up slowly, pain shooting through his side, and looked around. Everywhere he looked, he saw bodies. Some were human, some were alien, and some were burned so badly that he could not tell what they were. The silence was worse than the battle. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Daniel had fought for 12 hours straight, and every time he thought help would come, no one came. His hands were shaking, but his mind was still sharp. He was a soldier, and he was still alive. That meant his job was not finished yet. He saw movement ahead. Between the broken walls and the burning machines, a group of alien rebels stood in a circle. They were Zathari, tall, sharp, and cruel-looking, with black armor and glowing red eyes. In the middle of their circle was someone Daniel did not expect to see. The Zathari Queen. He had seen her only on screens before. She was taller than the rest, her silver crest shining even through the dirt and blood. She was on her knees, her hands tied behind her back. Daniel could tell she was injured. Her breathing was shallow, and her silver-blue blood stained the ground under her. She looked weak. She looked afraid. Daniel's first thought was that this was his chance. One shot, one grenade, and the war could be over. He reached for the last grenade on his belt, his fingers brushing the cold metal. He imagined how many lives could be saved if she died here right now. His chest tightened as he remembered his friends who had fallen. He remembered their screams, their laughter, their faces. His heart told him this was justice, but then he looked closer. The rebels were not protecting her. They were mocking her, shouting at her in their own language, kicking her when she fell. One of them raised a blade over her head, ready to strike. Daniel froze. If they killed her, it would not end the war. It would make it worse. The rebels wanted chaos. They wanted the galaxy to burn, and her death would give them exactly that. Something inside Daniel shifted. He felt anger, but not the kind that made him want to kill. It was the kind that made him want to protect. She was their queen, but right now she was just another living being about to die helplessly. His hand dropped away from the grenade. He could not let them kill her. He checked the rifle he had taken from a fallen friend. It had a few shots left. His body screamed at him to stop, to run, to hide, but his mind was clear now. He took a deep breath, wiped the blood from his eyes, and stepped out from cover. "Hey," he shouted. His voice was hoarse but loud enough to make the rebels turn. They were surprised to see a human still standing. Daniel opened fire. His first shot hit the one with the blade. The others roared and charged toward him, but Daniel kept moving, kept firing. The sound of his rifle echoed through the ruins. It was a blur of motion and pain. Daniel fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. He ducked, rolled, grabbed a fallen blade, and struck back. His mind focused on one thing: reach the queen. When the last rebel fell, Daniel stood shaking, his chest rising and falling fast. His armor was cracked, his arms bleeding, but he was still standing. The queen stared at him with wide golden eyes. Her breathing was shallow, and her voice trembled as she spoke. "Why?" she asked. Her words were broken but clear enough. She could not understand why a human, her enemy, would save her. Daniel did not answer right away. He knelt beside her and cut the ropes around her wrists. "Because someone has to," he said finally. His voice was quiet but firm. He put her arm over his shoulder and helped her stand. "Come on. We're getting out of here." For the first time that day, Daniel felt like he had done something right. The battle was not over, but maybe, just maybe, this choice could change everything. The night seemed endless as Daniel and the Queen moved through the broken city. Fires still burned in the distance, casting long shadows across the ruins. Daniel's steps were slow now, his body nearly giving up. Every few minutes he looked over his shoulder to make sure no rebels were following. His ears were sharp, listening for any sound that might mean danger. The Queen stayed close, silent as a shadow, her golden eyes watching everything. They found an abandoned bunker half buried under rubble. Daniel pushed the broken door open and guided her inside. The place was dark and smelled of smoke and dust, but it was safe for now. He lowered her gently against the wall and collapsed on the ground across from her. His chest rose and fell quickly, sweat and blood mixing on his face. For a while, they just sat there in silence. Daniel's mind was heavy. His body begged for rest, but he knew they could not stay too long. He had no food, no water, and his wound was getting worse. He tore a strip of cloth from his undersuit and pressed it to the wound in his side. Pain shot through him and he bit back a cry. The queen crawled closer, her face calm but her eyes focused on his injury. Without asking, she pressed her clawed hands against the wound to stop the bleeding. Daniel flinched at her touch but did not push her away. Her hands were cold but careful. She said something softly in her own language. Words he could not understand, but her tone was gentle. For a moment he forgot they were enemies. "Why did you save me?" she asked at last, switching to rough but clear human speech. Daniel looked at her for a long time before answering. "Because letting them kill you would make me just like them." His voice was quiet but steady. "I don't know if that means anything to you, but it means something to me." She studied him as if seeing him for the first time. Then she nodded once and leaned back against the wall. "You are strange, human," she said softly. "But maybe not all humans are monsters." Daniel almost laughed at that. "Funny. Most humans think the same about you." Before they could say more, a sound echoed from outside. Heavy boots, many of them. Daniel's heart jumped. The rebels had found them. He grabbed his rifle, though it had almost no ammo left, and stood in front of her. The queen also stood, retrieving the blade she had taken earlier. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. They were ready. The door burst open and blaster fire filled the bunker. Daniel dove behind a broken crate and returned fire, hitting the first rebel. The queen moved like lightning, slashing at another who tried to enter. More rebels poured in. Daniel's rifle clicked empty and he tossed it aside, grabbing a metal pipe from the floor. He swung it hard, knocking one rebel to the ground. The fight was chaos. Sparks flew as blasters hit the walls, the air filled with smoke and screams. Daniel fought with everything he had left, his muscles burning, his mind screaming for him to survive. The queen fought beside him, her movements sharp and precise. For a moment, Daniel felt like they were not enemies at all, just two warriors fighting to stay alive. A rebel grabbed Daniel from behind, slamming him against the wall. Daniel struggled, gasping, until the queen leapt forward and drove her blade into the rebel's chest. The alien fell and Daniel stared at her, shocked. She had just saved him. She met his eyes and gave the smallest nod before turning to face the next attacker. When the last rebel fell, the bunker was silent except for Daniel's ragged breathing. He sank to the floor, too tired to move. The queen sat down across from him, her crest dim in the low light. They were both covered in blood, some of it there, some of it not. Daniel's vision blurred. His body could not take much more. He felt himself slipping into unconsciousness, but before his eyes closed, he heard the queen's voice, soft and strange. "Do not die, human," she said. "You are not finished yet." Her words stayed with him as darkness took over. For the first time since the war began, Daniel felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. Daniel woke with a start, his body sore and stiff. The first thing he saw was the queen sitting near the doorway, her back straight, watching the entrance like a guard. She had not slept. For a moment, Daniel just stared at her, surprised by the strange calm he felt. Then the sound of distant voices reminded him they were still in danger. He struggled to his feet, pain shooting through his side. The queen moved quickly to steady him. Her touch was firm but careful. "We must move," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of urgency. Daniel nodded. He knew she was right. If the rebels found the bodies outside, they would search every bunker. They had to leave before dawn. They slipped out into the night. The air was cold, and the sky was turning dark blue as the first light of morning crept over the horizon. The battlefield looked even worse now. Smoke rose in long black pillars, and the silence was heavy, broken only by the distant crackle of fire. Daniel gritted his teeth and pressed forward, keeping his rifle close even though it was empty. As they crossed the ruins, Daniel noticed the queen watching everything with sharp eyes. She moved with grace, but he could see she was still weak. Every so often she stumbled, and Daniel caught her arm before she could fall. Each time she gave him a small nod, as if thanking him without words. They reached a collapsed wall overlooking the valley. From there, Daniel saw something that made his stomach turn. A convoy of rebels marching through the valley below. There were too many of them to fight, and they were heading toward the direction. Daniel climbed inside and searched for supplies. To his relief, he found a half-empty water bottle and a small medical kit. He drank greedily and handed the rest to the queen. She hesitated for a moment, then took it and drank slowly. When she was done, she handed it back to him with a quiet thank you in her own language. He patched up his wound as best he could, biting down on his sleeve to keep from crying out. The queen watched silently, her face unreadable. When he was done, she placed her hand on his shoulder. "You are strong," she said. "But strength will not be enough if we are caught again." Daniel met her gaze. "Then we don't get caught," he replied. He managed a weak smile. For a moment, the queen almost smiled back. As night fell again, they set out once more. The world felt empty, as if the war had burned everything away. Daniel kept walking, step after painful step, because stopping was not an option. The queen stayed beside him, her presence strangely comforting. Together they crossed the dead land, two enemies who had become something more, survivors. By the time they reached the outskirts of the valley, Daniel's legs were shaking. He collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. The queen knelt beside him, her claws gently touching his arm. "Rest," she said. "Just for a moment." Daniel nodded, closing his eyes. For the first time since the fighting began, he let himself feel the weight of everything. The death, the pain, the fear. But there was also a small spark of hope burning inside him. If they could make it to human lines, maybe this nightmare could finally end. He opened his eyes and looked at the queen. "We keep moving at first light," he said. She nodded. There were no more words needed. They were no longer just running from death. They were running towards something that could save both of their worlds. The next morning came with a pale gray sky. Daniel woke to the sound of soft footsteps. The queen was already awake, standing near the edge of the ruins, watching the horizon. She looked almost like a statue, her silver crest glowing faintly in the dawn light. For a moment, Daniel just watched her. It was strange to think that only a day ago she had been his enemy. Now she was the only reason he was still alive. He tried to stand, but pain shot through his side and forced him to sit back down. His wound was worse. Blood had soaked through the bandage. He knew he would not last long without proper medical care. The queen turned when she heard his pained breath and came to kneel beside him. She touched the wound gently, her claws careful not to hurt him. "You cannot travel far like this," she said softly. "We don't have a choice," Daniel replied. His voice was rough. "If we stop now, they will catch us. If they catch us, we're both dead." He forced himself to stand, though every muscle screamed in protest. The queen stepped closer, letting him lean on her for support. For a moment, Daniel felt a strange comfort in her presence. They set off again, moving slowly through the empty valley. The world felt quiet, almost too quiet. The bodies of soldiers and rebels lay scattered across the ground, reminders of the battle that had been fought here. Daniel tried not to look at them, but every time he saw a human face, his chest tightened. He remembered the names of the men and women he had fought beside. He wondered if he was betraying them by saving the queen. At midday, they heard the sound of engines in the distance. Daniel's heart jumped. It could be human patrols or more rebels. They hid behind a cluster of rocks and waited. Soon a group of rebel scouts appeared, moving quickly. Daniel's grip tightened on the blade he carried. He was ready to fight if he had to, but his body felt too weak. The queen placed her claw on his arm, stopping him. "Wait," she whispered. Her golden eyes narrowed as she studied the rebels' movements. They were searching the area, but they had not seen the tracks yet. If they stayed quiet, the scouts might pass. For several tense minutes, they stayed hidden, barely breathing. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Finally, the rebels moved on, their voices fading into the distance. Daniel let out a slow breath. The queen still had her claw on his arm, her touch steady and grounding. "You are lucky," she said softly. "But luck will not save you forever." They kept moving until Daniel's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the ground, his body refusing to go any farther. The queen knelt beside him, her face unreadable. Then, to Daniel's surprise, she lifted him onto her back. Her body was lean but strong, and she carried him as if he weighed nothing. Daniel was too weak to protest. All he could do was hold on. As she walked, Daniel watched her from over her shoulder. He saw the way her steps never faltered, the way she kept scanning the horizon for danger. It struck him that she could have left him behind at any time, but she had not. She was risking her life for him now, just as he had for her. When night fell, they found shelter in a cave. The queen lowered Daniel gently to the ground and gathered scraps of wood for a small fire. The warm glow filled the cave, and for the first time since the battle, Daniel felt safe. The queen sat near him, her golden eyes shining in the firelight. "Why are you helping me?" Daniel asked suddenly. His voice was tired but curious. "You could have left. You could have killed me." The queen looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because you chose to save me when you could have killed me. No one has ever done that for me. Not even my own kind. I do not forget such things." Daniel felt something deep in his chest shift. He realized he trusted her now. Not just because she had saved him, but because she meant what she said. He closed his eyes and let the fire's warmth wash over him. For the first time in years, he believed there might be an end to this war that was not written in blood. The queen stayed awake through the night, keeping watch. Daniel slept, his breathing steady despite the pain. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the cave there was silence. Two enemies had become allies, and something stronger than fear was growing between them. The next day began with the sound of distant thunder, though the sky was clear. Daniel opened his eyes slowly and saw the queen still sitting near the fire's ashes. She looked tired but alert, her claws wrapped around the blade she carried. The storm of war was still close, and they both knew it. Daniel tried to stand, but pain made him gasp. The queen was at his side instantly, steadying him. "We cannot stay here," she said softly. "The rebels will search the caves next." Daniel nodded. He hated that she was right. He hated that he was slowing them down. But there was no choice. He leaned on her shoulder, and together they left the cave. The morning air was cold and sharp. They moved slowly through the rocky hills, staying low and silent. The world felt empty, but Daniel knew they were not alone. He could feel it, like a shadow following them. Every broken branch, every shift of the wind made his pulse quicken. By midday, they reached the edge of a dried riverbed. Daniel's strength was nearly gone, but he forced himself forward. That was when the sound came, the low hum of engines. Rebel patrol craft. Daniel grabbed the queen's arm and pulled her down behind a boulder. A moment later, 3 sleek black hovercrafts glided into view, kicking up dust. The queen's golden eyes narrowed. "They are hunting us," she said. Daniel felt his stomach twist. There was no way they could outrun the patrols. Not in his condition. They needed a plan. Daniel spotted a cluster of ruins across the riverbed, the remains of an old outpost. "If we can get there, maybe we can hold them off long enough for help to come," he said. It was a gamble, but it was their only chance. They sprinted, or tried to. Daniel stumbled several times, but the queen kept him on his feet. The hum of the engines grew louder as the rebels spotted them. Blaster fire scorched the ground near their feet, and Daniel felt the heat of a near misbrush past his leg. They dove into the ruins just as the patrol craft opened fire. The next minutes were a blur of chaos. Daniel fired the last shots from his rifle, then threw his grenade, taking out one of the patrols. The explosion lit the sky, and for a brief moment Daniel felt hope. But more rebels were coming. "Stay behind me," the queen shouted, her voice sharp with command. She leapt into the fight, her blade flashing in the sunlight. Daniel watched, stunned, as she cut through the first wave of attackers with precision and fury. She fought like a true queen, every strike controlled, every move filled with purpose. Daniel grabbed a fallen blaster and joined her, firing until his arms felt numb. The two of them stood back to back, fighting against the tide. The ruins shook with the sound of battle. Dust and smoke filled the air, and Daniel's ears rang with the noise. A rebel charged at Daniel, knocking the weapon from his hands. Daniel struggled, but the rebel was stronger. Just as the blade came down, the queen struck, saving him again. She grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him back to his feet. "Do not fall now," she growled. "We are almost through." Their stand seemed endless, but finally, the rebels began to fall back. The explosion of the destroyed patrol had called attention from elsewhere. Daniel heard the roar of human gunships approaching. The surviving rebels retreated, disappearing into the hills. Daniel collapsed against a wall, his chest heaving. The queen stood over him, her crest glowing in the dim light. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "You fight like my best warriors," she said softly. "Perhaps you are one." Daniel gave a weak smile. "Or maybe I'm just too stubborn to die." The queen almost smiled back. She reached out a clawed hand and helped him to his feet. "Then we finish this together," she said. In the distance, the human gunships landed, soldiers pouring out. Daniel felt relief wash over him, but also fear. What would they do when they saw him standing next to the enemy queen? He knew he would have to choose his next words carefully, and that choice might decide if the war truly ended here, or if it burned on forever. Dawn broke over the hills like a silent promise. Daniel sat on a piece of broken stone, his rifle across his knees, staring at the horizon. His body ached, but he was still alive. Beside him, the queen stirred, her crest catching the first light of morning. She looked weaker than before, but her eyes held a quiet fire. She was not just surviving, she was waiting. The sound of engines came first, low and distant. Daniel's heart tightened. This was it. Human gunships swept over the valley, dust billowing under their rotors. Soldiers poured out, weapons raised, fanning across the ruins. For a moment, everything felt frozen. Daniel stood, helping the queen rise. Her weight leaned against him, but she stayed proud and tall. When the first squad saw them, there was shouting. Weapons were aimed. Daniel's finger twitched near his rifle, but he didn't lift it. Instead, he raised one hand. "Hold your fire," he yelled, his voice hoarse but strong. The soldiers hesitated. The commander stepped forward, her helmet reflecting the morning sun. "Sergeant Hale?" she called. "Step away from the target." Daniel shook his head. "She's not a target," he said. "She is under my protection." His words seemed to hang in the air. The soldiers exchanged glances. No one moved. The queen stood silently at his side. Even now she did not beg. She only placed a clawed hand on Daniel's arm and waited. Daniel could feel the weight of every choice he had made pressing down on him. But he did not back down. "She is the reason the rebels are scattered," Daniel said, louder now. "She is the key to ending this war. If you kill her, this will never stop." The commander hesitated. Daniel could see the conflict in her stance. Protocol said to eliminate enemy leadership on sight, but Daniel had never been one to follow orders blindly. Finally, the commander lowered her weapon. "Bring them aboard," she said sharply. Both of them. Relief nearly dropped Daniel to his knees. He nodded once and helped the queen toward the waiting transport. Soldiers watched with tense silence, but none interfered. Inside the gunship, the queen sat across from him, her golden eyes never leaving his face. For the first time, she spoke without pride or command. "You risked your life for me," she said softly. Daniel met her gaze. "Maybe I was tired of losing everything," he admitted. "Maybe saving you was the only thing that made sense anymore." She tilted her head. "Then perhaps there is hope for your kind. And mine." As the gunship lifted into the sky, Daniel looked down at the burning ruins below. The war was not over, not yet. But he knew something had changed. Somewhere in the ashes of this world, peace had taken its first breath. He leaned back, closing his eyes as exhaustion finally claimed him. The queen stayed silent, watching over him until the gunship vanished into the morning light. For the first time since the war began, Daniel allowed himself to believe that tomorrow could be different for both their worlds. Daniel's heart was still racing as he helped the queen limp through the burning ruins. Every step felt heavy, every shadow felt dangerous. The sky was still red and smoke covered the stars. The war had taken everything from him, but right now he was not thinking about revenge. He was thinking about keeping her alive. He had no idea why, but he knew it was the right thing to do. They moved behind a broken wall to catch their breath. Daniel leaned against the stone, sweat running down his face. The queen stood silently beside him, breathing hard. She was weak but still proud, her golden eyes sharp. She did not thank him, and she did not ask for help. She only watched him closely, as if trying to understand him. Daniel checked his ammo. He had only a few shots left in the rifle. His last grenade was still at his belt. If more rebels came, they would not survive for long. His body hurt everywhere, but his mind was busy with thoughts he could not stop. Should he keep saving her? Was he betraying his people by helping their enemy leader? What if his commanders found out? What if she killed him the moment she was strong enough? He remembered the way the rebels had treated her. They had no loyalty, no respect. They wanted her dead more than the humans ever did. He remembered his friends who had died because of this war. He felt his anger again, but this time it was mixed with something else and a strange respect. She had fought for her people just like he had fought for his. Maybe they were not so different. Suddenly, voices came from behind the ruins. More rebels were coming. Daniel cursed under his breath. He grabbed the queen's arm and pulled her forward. They had to move. She stumbled but did not resist. They ran through the ruins, hiding behind walls, stepping over broken weapons and bodies. The sound of rebel boots grew closer. Daniel's heart pounded harder. He was running out of places to hide. His lungs burned and his legs felt like lead, but he refused to stop. He had made his choice. He could not leave her behind now. They reached an old transport vehicle lying on its side. Daniel climbed over it and helped her through. The rebels were getting closer. He could hear their shouts. He knew they would find the trail of blood soon. There was no way out except forward. Daniel turned to the Queen. "Can you fight?" he asked quickly. She looked at him, then at the blade he offered her. Slowly, she nodded. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were steady. They waited in silence as the footsteps grew louder. Daniel could feel his pulse in his ears. When the first rebel appeared, he opened fire. The blast lit up the ruins, and the Queen leapt forward with a sharp cry, striking the second rebel. The fight was fast and brutal. Daniel moved on instinct, ducking behind cover, firing carefully, using every last round. The Queen fought beside him, her movements elegant but desperate. When it was over, Daniel was on his knees, breathing hard. The Queen stood over the last rebel, her blade dripping with blood. She looked at Daniel, and for a moment he thought she might kill him. Instead, she dropped the blade and sat down next to him. They were both exhausted. Daniel laughed softly, though there was no joy in it. "We're not going to make it if we keep this up," he said. The Queen tilted her head as if thinking. "Then we do not stop," she replied, her voice calm but cold. For the first time, Daniel saw the strength in her that made her a queen. They left the bodies behind and kept moving through the night. Daniel knew they would have to find shelter soon. His wound was bleeding again and his vision was blurry. He pushed himself to keep going, telling himself he would stop when she was safe. Deep inside, he knew he was risking everything. His life, his duty, maybe even the war itself. But he could not turn back now.